Welcome to The Cynical Developer, the podcast that helps you to improve your development knowledge and career through explaining the latest and greatest in development technology and providing you with what you need to succeed as a developer. In this episode, we talked to Mattias Karlsson about open source software. Mattias has been working professionally as a developer for almost 20 years. He started coding on 8-bit computers in the 80s and has been passionate about coding ever since. He's a partner and senior architect at Vicom, a Microsoft partner located in Gothenburg, Sweden. Outside of work, he's a father of two, a husband of one, and actively contributes to the .NET open source community. He is known mostly for being one of the main contributors behind the open source Cake build system, which is also part of the .NET Foundation, and we spoke to Gary Ewan Park about Cake on our first ever episode for this podcast. So it's good to get someone else on that's involved with other guests. So welcome, Mattias.
Thank you. Nice to be on.
Yeah, it's good to get you on, and it's another person from a different country. We're doing quite well. It's very unusual with this podcast that we're a UK-based podcast, but we're stretching out all over the world. We've had Australians on, we've had people from South Africa, from Italy, and now we've got Sweden. So we're definitely making the trip round.
Really international now.
Yeah. So we're here to talk about open source software, and our listeners out there, some of them will know what it is, some of them won't. So we'll kick it off with a nice, easy question of what is open source software?
Well, it's a subjective question in some ways because many have opinions, but I think for me it refers to something that you can contribute to and share. So it's publicly available. So this been like before Microsoft had like the shared source concept, but that's not open source. You have to be able to contribute and raise issues and it be publicly available.
For it to be open source, does it mean that it's always taking contributions from other people, or just the fact that you can get to the source code?
Well, I think it has to be the contribution part because otherwise it just shares, and it has to be a license that's open in a way that makes it possible.
Sure. So you mentioned license in there. I guess it's covered by a specific license or lots of different licenses that say what you can and can't do with the code. Yeah.
So it needs to be some kind of permissionless license like the MIT or BSD or the GPL or something that makes it possible to contribute and give back to the source code.
Yeah. Okay. So if this source code's out there, it's freely available, is there a lot of support for it? So could I use it for both commercial and personal projects?
Well, that's totally up to the maintainer because some have like the dual license, so they allow both. Some have open source, but they have a commercial support for it. And some are just like the project I'm on, that we're just an open source project with an open source license, and there's no commercial backing, but there's a lot of people and a community around it that propel the project forward.
Right. Okay. So in some of these projects that have these extra streams for the commercial support, I guess they're paid for support, are they? And they come with guarantees and stuff. So if I was to download it and use it on a project in work and it brought my servers down and it cost my customers money, they'd be insured and covered for that.
Yeah. Well, that's like the case of when I have often I have like a free open source license where you're on your own in a way, and some have like a commercial license where you pay for support and all the things that you buy software. The only difference is that you can contribute to the source.
If it's just out there and it's free and I use it, it's all down to me and the business that are using it. If it screws up and deletes all my customer data, that's my fault and nobody else's.
Yeah. And that's why it's important to check the license so it's compatible with what you're doing. But it's mainly like if it's free as in open, but it's not like free and free beer. That's what I usually say.
Yeah. I've worked places where they do allow us to use open source software, and some places that have not allowed us to use it. So for the listeners, it's always good to go and ask your line manager before you go and download something and start using it. Because a lot of the time it seems like the best thing to do. Drop into NuGet and install the latest package or whatever to solve your problem, but it could be costly in the long run.
Yeah, and also like always good to check with your so you have the blessing from your manager, because sometimes when you, especially if you start to contribute code, it can be like if you ask in the forum, like before you do it, then often no issue, but it can be issue if they find that company source code out there. So it's good to just, and many like the bigger open source projects require that you have, if you're working for a company, you have to have sign off from that company.
Yeah, because I guess the contracts that we're working under for these employers, some of them do stipulate that any code that you do during working hours is company property. And also they can try and say that some of the code that you write outside of work is company property.
Yeah.
But if you're doing something that's tackling a specific project and a specific problem for the business that you work for, and it's actually an add-on you're building for that bit of software, and you go and push it into the open source software project, then really you are taking that company that you work for's code and giving it away.
Yeah, and that's often like you often come and you see on Stack Overflow that code that's actually belongs to someone else that ends up there. So it's good to check and have a policy there, and it's always better to check before you do something, because then it's often a non-issue. But if you just push it out, it can be a big issue.
Yeah. I think Stack Overflow recently changed their terms and conditions as well. So if you're taking what you deemed as open source or free bits of code off Stack Overflow that you're supposed to, I believe, now attribute it back to the Stack Overflow post that you got it from. Yeah,
because they don't have like an MIT or like the GPL. They have a Creative Commons license, which requires attribution.
Sure.
So it's a little bit different, but you can also change the license in your Stack Overflow post and say, I like MIT license this code, so it can be freely used without like any. And that's the same if you have a GitHub repository. If you, it's important that you have a license, because if you don't, then no one can actually use that code, because it's basically you have the full copyright and they can't take that code.
Yeah.
So that's why it's important to specify a license, even if it's boring. But it's find someone that resonates with what you think and what you're like. Do you want attribution or not? And they're actually pretty good guides. And GitHub, when you create a new project, have ready templates you can choose for the most common licenses there.
Yeah, the licenses and that are on the likes of GitHub, when you open them up, some of them are so long-winded and so complicated. Now, there is a website out there that simplifies them, and I can't think what it is off the top of my head. I don't know. Do you know what the website is for it?
I don't remember. I usually just go for the MIT, because I want it to spread as much as possible.
Sure.
And it doesn't have it depends what you're doing, because like something like the Linux kernel really want something to get back, so the GPL makes sense, but it's also limiting because it's not compatible with. It can be problems. It's not compatible with other devices.
So if in doubt, pick MIT.
Yeah.
And I will dig out that link and put it in the show notes if I can find it, because it helped me when I was reading through them and trying to work out which ones to use and which ones not to use. It was really good.
And the important part is that you do it in the beginning of the project, because if you do it later, then you have to go back to all contributors and check with them that it's okay that their contributions got relicense.
Sure. What does it take for me to become a contributor to open source software? Do I need to be a really experienced and rockstar talented developer, or could anybody go on and onto one of these websites like GitHub that we mentioned and contribute to a project?
Yeah, but because contribution can come in many forms, because just using the software can be one form of contribution, because you can get feedback, open issues, and it doesn't also have to be code, because that's kind of feedback that's important, because you can improve the product and improve the code. But of course you can, code is also a big part with the pull requests, and you can also be things like helping with testing and infrastructure, and if some is cross-platform, then you can perhaps help with the Mac part or things like that, so it's tested there. But of course, code is a big part, the pull requests. And you don't have to be like super experienced. Often you start small, and also you can start with something like documentation. help to see that the documentation is available in your language. Can be like help with translation, or you can be you find some error in documentation, and often on open source sites, even like in Microsoft has that docs.microsoft.com now that is open source documentation. So that can be a good place to start. So you also learn the project and you can help out, because that's often something a project lack, because it's not the highest priority, but it's a high priority to get adoption.
Yeah, sure. If I wanted to sit down and actually start getting involved with an open source project, you say like writing documentation is a good place to start. How about actually getting in and writing code? Is there a way that I should get into it? Should I look for bugs and then go and fix those bugs and push them in, or is there sort of an unwritten rule of this is how you approach contributing to a project?
Well, often a good place is to start with the issues, to see are there any outstanding issues, because many projects like flag some like with issues with beginner or up for grabs or things like that. So that can be a good place to start. But those issues are labeled because they're things they want to get done, but they aren't priority or they need help with it. So that's a good place to start. It's also a good place to start with issues, because that you can see how active a project is. Like if you create an issue, how fast do you get response? So that's because some projects like they're really mature, so they doesn't have master in code, but you can also see if it happens much with issues, because that's like the big support for them. And like things like Up for Grabs is a website where you can go and see all projects have flagged their issues with some tag, and then you can find like, oh, I want to contribute to a .NET project, and you can find different issues that way also. So that's a great site if you want to start contributing.
Yeah, sure. Do open source projects as a whole follow a certain standard? Are there certain guidelines for maybe how your code should be written, or is it like sort of the business applications, no matter which company you go and work for, they've all got their own standards and they outline those somewhere in a document?
Well, usually it's basically up to who created the project that has the coding standard and things like that. But there are some rules that when you can, like often there's like a README file that states the intent of the project and what it does. And when you're going to contribute, there's also a contributing file. And there it says if like the expectations of people that's going to contribute. So you have things like we want tests can be written there, or we want you to always contribute from a feature branch, and you should always like direct your pull request to the master or develop branch or whatever. So that's guidelines to look for, that you have a contributing file in the root of the project. Right. And also check the licenses. That's okay. We will talk about it. Many have like more and more adopt the code of conduct. I think we probably should do, but it's basically like common sense isn't that common. So it says like be nice to each other regardless of who and what they are and things like that. That's I think important to have to. And many also now have like things like you can to GitHub add. So when you add an issue, they have templates for that and pull requests that also states what they want you to do. And that's also good guidelines for a maintainer to have those files in place, because that helps people to contribute to your code.
Okay. Now, if I was to go out and contribute to an open source project of some sort, what are the benefits for me? What am I going to get out of it? And it's really for the listeners that are probably sat there thinking, well, I've been sat coding all day. I come home from work and I've got my own little side project. Why do I need to dedicate any time to these open source projects? What would be the benefits for that person?
Well, I think one thing can be like learn things you don't do at work. So it could be that you want to learn JavaScript and you do C# all day at work, or you do like web forms, or you want to test MVC or ASP.NET Core and things like that. So it could be a really good if you want to develop as a developer. It's also a good thing like if you want to learn how to like collaborate on a bigger project, because it could be on like a smaller company or just yourself. And also like you have a possibility to influence a project to go against your direction. If you're using some piece of software at work, you can like by night get it to work the way you want if it's in the line with the maintainers. So I think, but basically it's a great learning experience because I learned like so much more about like Git, about tests and integrations. That's hard to learn just coding on your own. But if you have like a real project, it's a really good playground to learn that. And people like sending pull requests, learn things like code review, and you get a lot of feedback. And just watching that process can be a really great learning process.
Yeah, you mentioned learning Git there. A lot of the places that I've worked, we either use Subversion or we've used TFS or VSTS as the newer version is. But nowhere, apart from my newest role, actually used Git at all. So by contributing to GitHub and putting some projects on there, I've actually learned Git through that. And I was very much a Git by UI person, and all the purists out there now are banging their heads against the desk, and I've been chased down the street with pitchforks and flaming torches for saying it in the past, but I am now using the command line to do it. A little bit more confident and an understanding of what's going on, I think, helps there.
Yeah, but when you start with Git, they're just happy that they get code pushed because they don't get the two-step process that you stage the code and then push it, or things like that. But when you start to more advanced like branching and you do the feature things and you want to rebase, and then it's more into the Git way to do it. But the tools are getting better too. So like the Visual Studio Git tools is getting really good now, and like the source tree and everything, they're getting good too. But I'm also a command line guy because I don't want things to get in the way. And but one important thing I think also that by contributing open source, you can build your skill set and your CV also. So it can be a gateway if you want to get a new job, or if you're a student and want to build a CV before your education is done, then you can point to, I contributed to these projects, I've done these commits, and it's all public, and it's shareable knowledge. Because the problem can be if you're sitting at a company, perhaps it's not possible to share that what you've done. It can be under NDA or whatever. So sometimes you can do similar things you do at work, but do it in open source, and then it's open and you can put it on your CV. So
yeah, it's a really good point, because as someone that's hired and built teams in the past, I always go and have a bit of a stalk online of anybody that applies for a job to work in one of my teams, and I'll go and have a look, see what they've done on their LinkedIn profile, and see if I can find a link to their GitHub repository or something else like that they've got code on, and go and have a look at their actual code that they've committed. So yeah, that's it. It is a very valid point, that is, that getting it on your CV as well, because
especially if you're like a junior developer, you don't have that many positions to showcase. But if you've done open source, you can say, I've done this web API thing, I've done this kind of like build system, I've done this front end framework, or whatever you contribute to. You can basically build a line of positions without like straight out of school and say, I worked with this, and I can verify that because you have a commit history. So it's good. Like, so it can be, but also like it's I really like the contributing with people, and then like I get better at work because I've done all the pull request process. So I'm better at code reviewing and that part. And when you have like sometimes remote teams, the whole GitHub thing is a really good learning process.
Yeah, it is really good for learning and things like that. You know, we're going to be starting a little course type in between the interview episodes about becoming a developer and how to learn new skills. And it is one of the major points I've made out on that, is that having open source projects is really good, especially if you're contributing to them, because every other project that you've made, especially if you're just getting into the industry, they've all been Hello World applications, or it's been a clone of Microsoft Paint, or something that's really in the real world you probably wouldn't have to build, and it's probably not all that complicated to do. So you get out there and you get involved with some of these bigger projects with some senior developers and people with a lot of experience out there, and it'll benefit you very, very quickly, I think, and it'll give you one over on those other junior developers that are going for the same role as you.
Yeah, exactly.
So we've touched on that there's licensing around all these open source software projects, or OSS as they're more commonly referred to. Is there a governing body? Because I know in your introduction we talked about the .NET Foundation. Now, are they a governing body? Do they define any rules and that projects have to be maintained a certain way or anything like that?
Well, there are like foundations, like there's Linux Foundation and the .NET Foundation and several foundations. Like what the .NET Foundation does, like projects that are a member of that, they have certain things that they have to have the checklist that they have to fulfill. So there are things that you have to have this, like the README file. You have to have a code of conduct that's in line with they have these contributing things just to be like it's basically having good hygiene in the project that. So it makes it easier to people to contribute and good communication to the people that arrive to the GitHub project. So it's a lot of like basic common sense, but it's a good checklist to have, and they have that up on their like the .NET repository, on the home repository there. They have good guidelines there where you can see for any project. I think it's good to read those through because it's good tips and pointers there.
So if I wanted to take some of my software and try and get it into the .NET Foundation, I would have to make sure that before I approach them that it actually met these guidelines. And I guess you mentioned that really you should be adhering to a certain set of licenses and rules when you first start the project.
Yeah, and it's like some things, even if you don't get like the sentiment of like the code of conduct. If you don't have an objection against it, I think you should have one, because because some people can be like online aren't that nice, or are like if you have a conflict, you can always point that this is how we act. You should be polite, we should communicate, and you should be like this and that. So it's good to have like these. If you get the pull request, you can point to the contributing file and say, this is how I want my code submitted. We need tests. We want like the coding standard to adhere to this standard and things like that. So then you can point people to a place, and because you can't, people that arrive at a repository, if you don't have that, you can't expect them to know what you're thinking. You need to tell them, because it's really, that's one like a fun part with open source, because the people you never met that you're working with. So it's quite fascinating. Something like that. We have like with Cake, we have people from Australia, we have people from the US, we have from all over the globe contributing, and we would never done that if it wasn't for open source.
Yeah, it's giving all those people the opportunity to work together, and I think probably producing a lot of software that we would never have seen if it wasn't for those communities out there like GitHub and the likes.
Yeah.
Now, GitHub is the main one that we've spoken about. Are there any other services out there where I could go and find open source projects to get involved with?
Well, there are like Bitbucket's one of them, GitLab's one, but the main household name is GitHub. But like the repository bot can be anywhere, but I think the main part for an open source project to be at GitHub is discoverability also, because people, it's their go-to place. But there are alternatives. Like myself, I started with one of my first contributions was to the Dapper project. That was on Google Code. That's now terminated. But so there've been several places, and I was also active on Codeplex. But now I think it's been mainstream that GitHub is the place to be.
Yeah.
And I think there are people that have moved to GitLab's name, but mainly it's up to you. But I think GitHub is a good place to be discoverable. And they have like, it's been the common tool for people, but you can also there's a couple of companies that use like internal things, and you can it's just Git is distributed. So, but the interesting part with GitHub is the whole like the pull request things is custom, and the issue thing, and this with templates and things like that. So and I have a good integration against basically any CI system, and so that's the strength there. But there are alternatives too.
Yeah. Okay. Good. If I wanted to find a project to get involved with, is there an easy way to find a project, or is it just one of those that you work with something and you sort of find that you want to add something to it, and that's how you get involved?
Well, they are, like I mentioned before, the up for grabs site, but also like in October there's the Hacktoberfest website. So basically, you can collect points, and there's a lot of project joins there, and you can find their issues there. There's also like this around Christmas. There's the 24 pull requests. That's usually every year. That's so a whole, like a big point of the GitHub thing is also like just a Stack Overflow. There's the internet points thing.
Yeah.
You get points for contributing, and a good thing as me as maintainer is not now you also get points for reviewing pull requests.
Right.
Because and that's good because I basically, when I started, like the more active a project, you basically disappear from the GitHub stats before, because it takes a lot of time to review and test pull requests. Now you get points for that too, so that's good. And it could be one thing that a good place to start can be just if you have a project that you think is really that you use at work. A good project could be like add-ins or extensions to that project. That could be a good place to start to find things to do. Because many projects have an extension molder or things you can do to extend it, and then they can be like your small thing to start with.
Yeah, because I've started a project, and it's on GitHub, and it's called Debonair. It's a micro ORM or a micro ORM, depends how you want to say it. And I tried to take things back to basic there. But like you mentioned that you contributed to Debonair, one of the things that I really didn't like about Debonair was the inline writing of SQL, just because if you give developers that sort of power, they're going to abuse it. And I've worked with a lot of developers that really liked link to SQL and things like that. So being able to provide the link syntax. So through Debonair, you can actually write link queries which translate into SQL and execute against a very basic database. It does basic CRUD stuff. If you wanted to do anything a little bit more advanced, you'd have to take it to stored procedures. And at this point, it doesn't accept any inline hand-coded SQL. Now, I've put that on the GitHub repository, and I think that's under the MIT license, if I remember right. But up until I think 2 or 3 weeks ago, it was only me that actually done anything against it. Now, I've only got the license on there. I haven't got any rules of engagement or behavioural licensing or anything like that on there to say how I want things done. And somebody that we had, Daniele Pozzoboni, come on to talk about test-driven development, and he's taken the Debonair project and he's applying unit tests to it, because being the very good developer that I am, I did everything test-driven development. No, I didn't. So he's going in there and adding stuff to that. And I think the point I'm trying to get to is that if I go and take one of my projects and stick it onto GitHub, does that straight away say that it's an open source project and I can claim that, or does it have to have an active community around it of more than just myself?
Well, if it's out there and you accept like issues and pull requests, then it's an open source project. So that's and many projects, like, they aren't overnight successes. Like with Cake was almost a year before it started to become like get major contributions from community, and so,
Right.
so it's often like people think they come from nowhere, but often you worked for quite a while for it. And that's like the other side of the open source is just the maintainer part, because I think it's important to have tests, because even if you don't write test this work, it's important open source, because if someone clones your repository, they need to know it works when they clone it. So then it's great when, like, before you start contributing, to run the test and see it. You haven't broken that everything works. And that's also the important part for a maintainer. Make sure that your default branch always builds.
Yeah.
And always have the test. So even as you as a maintainer, do your work in like in pull request and in feature branches. So anyone, because it's not now down, like if someone clones out and it won't even compile, that's like a no-go. People will go to the next project. So, and also like if you're targeting multi-platforms, make sure to have CI on each platform, because you maybe only have Windows on your laptop. So, and that's good services, because there are like Bitrise and Travis and many that offer for cross-platform, both for Unix and Mac and Windows. And AppAir is one of those from Windows, and that's very popular, because then you will also have the benefit of that if you have one of those systems, also it will test pull requests when people submit, and you will have more confidence in merging pull requests and reviewing them.
Yeah. So I've got this project up there, regardless of the fact that I have actually got a project. If I as a listener had some code I wanted to put into GitHub, how do I get exposure for that project? Is there a specific place I should go and post about it, or is it a case of sticking it all there and just hope that somebody discovers it?
Well, I think like the social media is really important. So like if you shout it out on your blog, tweet it, Facebook, LinkedIn, other like whatever. So that's one way to spread news. Also, if there are these sites like Up for Grabs and 24 Pull Request and Oktoberfest that have if you tag it this way, you can submit the pull request and will be visible there. For .NET projects, we have there's many the blog post you can submit to get listed there and things like that. So I think you just have to work be out there, and if you are at conference, get a sticker and bring stickers or whatever, so people get interest for the project.
Oh yeah, you can't beat a good sticker. It's that's something for me that I've always been dead against, putting stickers on anything. And then I got a few podcast stickers, and they went on my laptops. And then this new job that I started, they gave us stickers for their products, and now my work laptop, my personal laptop, my little notebook, they're all covered in stickers. I've become a bit of a sticker whore, I think is the only nice way to put it. Every time anybody's got any free swag to give away, I'm all over that, especially if it comes with stickers. I got a new pair of trainers today, and it came with stickers. I was more impressed that it had stickers than the trainers themselves.
Yeah, well, I have two laptops. I have one laptop that has stickers on it, and my main laptop only have the cake sticker. So I used to be I don't want stickers either, but it's also it's been the laptop I brought to conference thing that's covered in stickers. So it's
Yeah, I recently picked up a load of the GitHub stickers and some of their vinyls as well, and I put some of them on the laptops, and then just the proper vinyls, which they just look too good to put on my laptop. I haven't decided where I'm going to put those yet, but it's got to be somewhere nice. Pride of place somewhere.
Yeah, on your kids or something.
Yeah, I've got 3 stickers and 2 kids, so one on each of their foreheads and one on the wife's maybe.
Yeah, that's a winning concept.
Yeah, I'm not sure how well that'll go down with them. So we're almost out of time, but just as a final question, is what advice would you give to an open source newbie really about getting involved? What should they do?
Well, they should start small. So the first thing I think you should always do is, if you want to contribute, raise an issue first. So just to see if the project is active also, and to get buy-in from the maintainers. So you don't do unnecessary it's not fun to spend a whole week coding something and they're we won't accept that. So if you check first and start small with something like documentation on something so it's a safe thing to start with, and also read and honor the guidelines that the project offer. And that can be a good contribution, because if they don't have a contributing MD or don't have a README, that can be actually a good starting point, because that won't break the code, but it will improve the project.
Yeah, fantastic. Yeah, the starting small and fixing something quite small is good. I'm not going to name any names, but a friend of mine he has just got into contributing to open source software. He downloaded this package, found that there were some build errors, fixed the build errors, pushed it up for evaluation, and when the continuous integration ran for it, he found that he'd broken all of the builds. So he had a bit of a panic, sort of half an hour to undo everything he'd done, and so that it built again. And it turned out it was a build error just locally on his machine. It was something to do with character sets or something, I believe. So, yeah.
But that's also like a common problem to fix, because there's many, like me as a Swede, we have can have different date formats and different. So that can actually be something to be. I fixed so many open source projects just because culture related issues. In .NET is like often the good thing, like make sure you use invariant culture everywhere, so you don't have a set culture, so you always get like unit tests work in the same way, and so that's going to be a good place to start. But just because you're living somewhere else where there's a different currency and a different date format, and they use combats instead of dots, so that can be like just checking out and running the unit test and it failed because you're a Swede. That could be a good contribution to fix that. Make sure the strings are using invariant culture, or make sure it's. It could be that the software is meant to have like EN/US culture, and then make sure it's set everywhere. So that's also a good place to start. And then also like the good recommendation, like run the tests first, so you know that you didn't broke it. Because if the test failed before, you know that it's failed. But if you've done a lot of coding and it fails, then it could be because of you. So that's good, tip to run the test first.
Yeah, fantastic. So we're out of time now. So I'd say thanks, Mattias, for coming on and explaining a little bit more about open source software. And I hope that some of the listeners out there got something from that and can go out there and get involved. Go and have a look at my Debonair project. Go and have a look and a laugh at that and realise that's not how you write code. It's terrible. So thanks.
Oh, thanks for having me.
Yeah, not a problem. So you've all been listening to The Cynical Developer. I'm James Stoddart, and you've been listening to Mattias Karlsson talking about open source software. If you enjoyed this episode, please leave a review on your favourite podcast platform and help The Cynical Developer to grow by increasing its audience. If you have any questions about this or any other episode, then drop us an email, a tweet, or leave a comment on the website, where you can find all the resource links and show notes for each episode.